You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Conveyancer podcast. Today I'm talking about the business of law and in particular the business of running a law firm. I have Guy Longhurst with me. Guy is the managing partner of Ellisons Solicitors. It's great to have you on the podcast, Guy. I'm really interested to hear about some of the challenges of what running a law firm is like in 2023, and I'm sure that a few of our listeners will have some sympathy as well as some empathy with you as well. But thanks so much for joining.
Thank you very much, David. Yeah, sympathy and empathy for lawyers is often thin on the ground, so I hope you do generate some, or we generate some. Yes, I'm the managing partner of Ellisons Solicitors. We've got 5 offices across Suffolk and Essex with about 275 people at the moment. That's my main job, I suppose, but my most important job is being a husband with 3 lovely daughters who are now 22, 20 and 18, and we live with 2 Labradors on the Suffolk-Essex border, and those who know the area will know that means I actually live in Essex, but would rather live in Suffolk.
I love that because I tell people, Guy, that I live in the South Lakes. Of course, I don't. I mean, Morecambe, there's actually a huge expanse of water between me and the lakes. But, you know, it sounds better.
It's an immediate giveaway.
So the topic of discussion today is the business of law. And I guess quite unusually, you've actually been with Ellisons for 25 years, which is a decent length of time in any business. I first really wanted to explore what you might consider to be the biggest things that have changed over the past 25 years in the law and in your time in the organization.
Yes, and when you say it like that, I mean, it's actually, I think, 27 years now with Ellisons. My father was solicitor as well, so I spent a lifetime growing up in the law. He was a partner with a law firm in Wisbech when we were young, before setting up as a sole practitioner in Bury St Edmunds in the early 80s. So I've seen the profession and the changes develop through his eyes, and particularly as a sole practitioner, and then obviously since joining Ellisons. In many ways, you say that the challenges, I mean, every business develops and changes, and the opportunities and threats that come along over a period like that. From my perspective, it was much more relaxed back in 95 when I joined Ellisons. I suppose we'd only just started to see the real effect of the liberalisation of some of the regulations around advertising, etc. Firms like Ellisons had been, dominant in their locations without much competition, not having to worry about pricing and quoting for work, advertising. You could make money from legal aided funded areas of work, including crime and family, and we still had significant criminal and family departments. But there was already, the winds of change were blowing hard, and you could see that some other firms have made the move to becoming more commercial and business focused, smarter, swankier, modern offices rather than those that reflected sort of Charles Dickens, which we sadly are still in our Colchester location. And so I suspect we were probably being left behind by some of the key competitors at that moment in time. That in itself probably started to create a challenge for Ellisons, and even as a junior lawyer, you could see that we were going to have to run hard and fast just to stand still. And if we wanted to catch up and be a leader, we'd need to work a lot harder. But it was much more relaxed, without a doubt. That I'd say that was the big difference. And then I suppose with technology as well, the big challenge for so many people and so many businesses is that work-life balance. I think I've been incredibly fortunate working for a firm like Ellisons and in a location like Colchester and East Anglia, where I could, take my children to school, go and watch them play sport, be home in the evenings for bath time, bedtime, having supper. If I'd been commuting to London, I would have missed all of that, and I would have hated it, because when becoming a parent, I think a switch was flicked in my brain that meant I really wanted to be with my family. But even then, having those benefits, the intensity of work in the legal profession has undoubtedly changed a lot over the last 25 years, along with client demands and expectations. It's not that long ago that solicitors sat almost in ivory towers. You would exchange a contract for someone to move house, for example, and then phone them and tell them when they were moving. There was none of this negotiating about moving dates, estate agents chasing through the chain, etc. That was a luxurious position to be in, and obviously that was never going to last, and probably a good thing it didn't. But that shift in the way in which you worked added extra burdens. So I would suggest that's the biggest change, is the pressure that all, not just lawyers, I think professionals and people involved in service sectors have found, is trying to manage that work-life balance, and then the impact that has on your health and well-being. I think 25 years has gone very quickly. I was playing rugby and cricket and a lot more sports before my children were born. Then you're juggling that time of how do you look after your family time and your clients. And I think actually looking after your body and of course mental well-being is something that was definitely lower down the agenda back then than it is now. And as I've worked through the business, David, obviously the things that you become more involved in management, the challenges you face are around running the business.
Mm-hmm.
I think solicitors' practices and partnerships structures in particular are very different. I know as we've brought in non-lawyers into the running of our business, they still wrestle with and don't quite understand why things are done in the way that they are in a law firm and in a partnership. They are peculiar, create their own peculiarities and challenges, and so that's always been an issue. And of course, I've been with the business a long time, so I'm a managing partner. Ellisons is a huge part of my life, of my family's life. My children have grown up knowing Ellisons. They've come to the office. Colleagues have seen them grow up. Our lives are firmly intertwined, and that's great in many ways, but equally has made it tough at other times.
You've articulated there a huge amount of information that I think a lot of people would empathize with and would sympathize with, particularly in those senior leadership roles. You've talked about some of the practicalities of running the business, and I do want to drill into that. Client expectations clearly have really changed, and we've talked about that on previous podcasts. But I want to drill into the staff expectations as well. You've talked about your own mental health and well-being and the challenges that brings, and the fact that Ellisons is ingrained into you. But how have staff expectations changed over the period of time that you've been with the business, and in particular since COVID as well?
Well, funnily enough, I was chatting about this to a managing partner of another firm yesterday. I think there is a dramatic change in the last 25 years, and as you said, probably the last 5 and 3 years. But when I joined Ellisons, my wife was we were getting married in 1997. I joined the firm in 95. We were going to move to Colchester. We exchanged contracts to buy a house, but I still didn't have an offer of a job on qualification. But I'd sort of been told that it was definitely happening. And I said to my wife, don't worry, I'll have a job. So I phoned her and I said, oh, great news. I've been offered the job. I'm staying on in the commercial property team. She said, brilliant. How much are you being paid? I said, £16,500. She said, well, that's not enough. I said, well, it's not negotiable. I'm delighted to have been offered an opportunity to stay with Ellisons. She said, well, no, you need to go back in and see your senior partner tomorrow and tell him that you need more money. So I plucked up the courage to go in and see Peter Powell, who was the senior partner at the time, and it wasn't as awkward a conversation as I expected it to be, and I ended up with £18,500. But it was only because of my wife pushing me that I would ever have dreamt to go back and have that conversation, and it was only through her pushing me every year on salary review that I ever discussed it. But I think my view, as similar to everyone at that time, was you were grateful for the opportunity to work with the firm. It was really hard to get a training contract. Your personal ambitions would be around promotion and ultimately partnership, an equity partnership at some stage. And you just knew if you got your head down and did the right things, that would come. But you weren't making a noise about, I want this, that, or the other. Roll on 25, 27 years, it's dramatically different, isn't it? I think, and that's not just for law. The labour market, as it is at the moment in the UK, means the challenge for firms in retaining and recruiting talented people have never been higher, and the competition to be more innovative in the support and the packages that you're offering your people is a real challenge, and probably our biggest single challenge, without a doubt. We've just achieved the Great Place to Work accreditation, which sounds a bit cheesy, but ultimately we do want to be a great place to work. If you want to be a successful business now, be it law or otherwise, you need to be a great place to work, because you need to attract really good people. You need to give them a career path. And so from our perspective now, David, it's not a case of hoping that people like Guy Longhurst turn up motivated and want to make it happen for themselves. You've got to give people the support and the tools and the encouragement to do that, which at Ellisons means that the investment in HR and learning and development for a firm of our size, well, I think we are, obviously we're significant in top 200 law firm, nearly 300 people, but I would never have expected us 25 years ago, 10, 15 years ago to be running the programs that we have now. We've got 6 levels in the Ellisons Academy that people can go in at, providing training around areas, primarily not law, to be honest. It's everything around being a lawyer and developing your own career. I mean, I was running through the program. It includes an introduction to burnout, sleep training, the importance of sleep, mental health is obviously a massive issue for everyone. The menopause policy that we introduced and training around the menopause policy. I mean, the diversity of the training and support available to our people now. I can't believe that we offer such a comprehensive program. I'm proud that we do. It's fantastic. It's got very little to do with me. I've got a fantastic HR director and COO who's driven that, but she's driven that out of a strategic desire, a value-based strategy to make a really, really good firm. And I think it does mean that Ellisons, I hope, is a really good place to work. I hope it's a great place to work for many, but equally the benefit of the Great Places to Work accreditation and the other accreditations you can go through is that opportunity to survey and talk to your people and understand what the frustrations are, because you'll never get it right totally, and not everyone will be happy, but you do get feedback that is valuable, as long as you then act upon it. I don't want people to leave Ellisons. When they join us, I want them to think that they can achieve everything they want to in their professional career and in their personal life as a result of being part of the Ellisons family and the development of the HR and L&D and all the other support that we can offer has been such an important part in that.
Well, here's a $1 million question, Guy. What's the trade-off? What are your expectations then of staff? It's great to be able to show them all of this, but there has to be a trade-off somewhere along the line, surely.
Yes, I think our expectations are very reasonable, but you are right, and that is a constant. Wrestle's not the right term, but there's a balance, isn't there? Now, to do all the things that we do in terms of the parties and the away days and the golf lessons and the hampers and the Easter event, all those things, staff family days and panto trip, it's got to be paid for. So we need, so for me, the successful business is if we have that value-based strategy, if we stick to those values, we will have a successful business, because I believe that the financials, the fundamentals will all then fall into line. But you've got to do the job, and we've got to do it well. But I think a motivated team, a happy team, will do that. And we're recruiting highly skilled people. If you're joining Ellisons as a qualified lawyer, we know that you can do the day job, and it's everything that we can do around that to help you to actually to deliver. But clearly, we still live in a world where, be it the chargeable hour, getting your time down, ultimately you've got to deliver a great service to the client. That service is primarily legal services. If you do that in accordance with the values, and we look after the fundamentals of ensuring the business is working to a decent profitability ratio, we will have a financially successful business and a business that's sustainable for the long term. Now, Ellisons celebrates 260 years next year. The work that we put in as a partnership group now should be to ensure that that long-term future of the business is sustainable.
I don't want to talk about professional indemnity insurance, and I don't particularly want to talk about technology, simply because they are talked about to death, I think, and we've certainly covered them on the podcast before. But I do want to ask you about what running a multi-site, multidisciplinary firm in 2023 looks like, and by extension, what you wish you knew in 2012 when you were appointed that you know now.
I liked this question, and you could take it back to earlier than 2012. My main regret is that I didn't realise at the time that my wife was right about everything, because it could have saved me a huge amount of time. And she's, as I say, I've always been at Ellisons, so she has an opinion about everything at the office as well. So it would have cut down on time. The multi-site point is interesting, and when our accountant came in recently to run through our results and benchmark the multi-branch point, multi-office point, it does make you slightly different. I mean, I don't see us as a traditional high street firm anymore because of the diversity of services and the specializations that we have, but we are in a number of locations, and some of those offices are smaller than others. The Frinton-on-Sea offices are typically branch office focusing on wills and probate and conveyancing. The biggest challenge there, what do I wish I'd known, is the issues around people that we've just talked about. Recruiting and retaining talented people into a number of offices and sites, ensuring that when I and others who are good at talking about the Ellisons journey, the value-based strategy, what it's going to be like to work at Ellisons and pursue a career pathway with us, is how do we ensure that the experience everybody receives when they join Ellisons matches up to that. And when you've got more than one site, that becomes more challenging. And the reality is that we've got, in a shrinking labour market, a very challenging labour market, persuading people that it's a good thing to work in a smaller office in a town maybe like Frinton, or we were in Clacton-on-Sea and Harwich, it is a real challenge. They want to be in bigger offices. People tend to gravitate towards corporate commercial disputes, etc., the types of sectors that we aren't operating in the smaller branch offices. The residential team, to a lesser extent private client, have struggled to recruit in those locations. You mentioned PI, of course, risk management as well. The things that keep you awake at night are risk issues around PI. Have we got somebody who's got far too much work on? What is the caliber of the person that you've brought into a small branch office? Is the supervision at the level it needs to be at? As well, of course, cyber risk, which would be the big worry that there's only so much that we can do to control that. So yeah, people and compliance and the burgeoning burden of red tape that all businesses have faced. I and many of my partners have been very slow to see the benefits of an accreditation such as Lexcel. So in 2012, we still hadn't achieved that. We talked about it. I think we felt that we were compliant, but our know your client was very much along the lines of we do know our clients. We are not a big conveyancing factory pulling in work from all over the UK. We're acting for families that the firm had acted for generations or have been referred to us. So I think we didn't have the systems and controls and disciplines in place that Lexcel gives you, and then embeds the disciplines that I think are of fundamental importance now. If we don't get the compliance right, I've got no business. If the insurance goes through the roof, I can't get insurance for Ellisons. We're stuffed. My dreams of a sustainable business going on for 350 years do not pass go.
I've heard it said a number of times, never believe that managing partners run law firms. PI companies do.
Yeah, I mean, I think to it that's but if you're well run, I was told, someone gave me that said, you can overcomplicate running a law firm, and I think they are incredibly simple businesses. It's a service industry. We've got a bank of clients. We're in locations. There is a demand. You just need to run the business well, but look after your clients, colleagues, cash, competencies. You're what more is there? Simple.
Well, let's look at the future then and think about what the future of Ellisons in particular, but the future of law looks like, because we've seen a huge amount of consolidation over the past few years, particularly in the conveyancing industry, but more widely as well. We know there's going to be a big technological impact. What are you doing as a business that is preparing you for 260 years, 300 years, 350 years?
I think that's something that's always evolving. There have always been opportunities and threats, David. I think life would be very boring. Change happens every single day, doesn't it? My father was a solicitor. Say, look at how the profession changed in the time that he worked within it. He used to come home for an hour and a half lunch break because the office was shut for an hour and a half, and they closed at 5 o'clock in the evening. And he never did any work outside of office hours. And of course, that all was swept away and changed over time. I think as a business, you're constantly looking forward in terms of your planning and trying to ascertain what those threats and thereby opportunities are. From our perspective, we decided several years ago that we needed to be larger. I think that there is a big challenge for the smaller firms, and has been for the last 10 or 15 years. I'm surprised the rate of consolidation hasn't been faster. I have to say, I think the very low interest rate environment we've been in since 2008-9, or until the last 18 months, obviously, has made it easier for firms to continue and to remain profitable in areas like wills, trusts, probate, and conveyancing. But that they've simply been bought time. Their ability to recruit and retain staff, I think, is incredibly difficult, and I know that from discussions with managing partners and partners from smaller law firms. Their succession planning in terms of bringing in future partners so difficult, which of course creates an opportunity for the bigger firms because the number of competitors is naturally going to shrink. We've talked about burgeoning burden of red tape, and with that comes work for lawyers. There are areas around compliance, health and safety. We talked GDPR, cyber risks, etc., which we'd never even heard of 10 years ago. So it's that ability to move and to evolve and to develop specialist areas which will ensure that firms have strong and sustainable futures, and by investing in their people. But also, I think the concerns around the future, I think, can be overplayed to an extent. If you look at the aging demographic in the UK, the money is with the over 60s and will continue to be so. And the over 60s are growing at such a fast rate. They're obviously, since COVID, more and more people have been retiring early. Do those people want to engage with AI or with computers, or do they want to have a trusted advisor, someone that they can rely upon, an individual, a firm? I believe it will undoubtedly be a mix, but I think there'll be an increased market for a firm like Ellisons to be the advisor of choice to older clients who need help. I don't know about you, but if I have to try and remember or reset another password just to do the most basic of tasks like park in a car park, my iPhone will be flying out of a window before too long. And I just think those frustrations will continue to exist. So that will create an opportunity for us. You need to be in a position to take advantage of the technological innovations that's there to support your clients, deliver a better service, improve productivity. And from our perspective, having invested very, very heavily in the infrastructure and architecture of IT, bolting on solutions, David, the one thing I've discovered over the last few years is actually remarkably cheap. When you compare those costs, I know that they're going up, but compared to people costs, they're not nearly as high. So I think clever and effective use of technology will continue to be of assistance to well-run businesses in delivering their service. And in terms of the threats around recruitment and retention, for me, again, what I'm so pleased about is that we've been able to move forward with a solicitor apprenticeship program. I don't really understand why the legal profession was so slow to realise that growing your own future workforce in the same way accountants have done for decades was the obvious route to go. And I see that as a way in which we can insulate ourselves or mitigate some of the risks around the recruitment issues that other firms will have, not right now, but over the next 5, 10, 15 years. These are all long-term decisions, Dave. And I think perhaps that's the difference with a law firm and a partnership, is that I'm not growing Ellisons with a view to floating it on the stock market or selling the equity. I'm growing Ellisons because I want to leave Ellisons and pass the baton on of the firm in a much better shape than it was when it was passed to me, so that the next generation can run with it.
Well, you've rather neatly preempted my final question, which is that you've talked about the challenges that a partnership structure presents right at the start of the discussion. You've obviously talked about the fact that you want to pass the business on in a better position than when it was inherited by you. I would put it to you that an LLP and a partnership model presents a risk to a law firm moving forward. Would you agree or disagree?
I don't see it as a risk to us at Ellisons at the moment, David. I've talked about smaller firms' issues with regard to succession. I think Ellisons is an excellent firm, and I'm very pleased at the moment. We'd restructured and moved to an LLP very late. That was only last year. We would continue to be a traditional partnership, but when we did that, in terms of other more junior partners being interested in joining the equity, there was huge interest. The conversation we were having 10, 15 years ago when we were trying to be persuaded to convert to LLP was, if you don't convert to LLP, people won't want to join Ellisons as a partnership. That simply wasn't borne out. I don't think there was a feeling that the risk around unlimited liability was such a concern, although if they'd stood with me in my garden during lockdown in the early days, they might have thought otherwise. But there genuinely does seem an interest and a desire to become an equity partner still in our firm, and I see it in other firms locally, the well-run firms that clearly are good businesses that have a good future. I think the issues around funding, and pricing, and again maybe some of the disciplines that weren't embedded early enough at Ellisons, like compliance through Lexel, is that the way in which we run our businesses and effectively give our clients so much credit is highly unusual. If I try and pick my car up and it's been serviced without paying for the bill there and then, I'm lucky to get the keys, and yet we're happy to run a file for 6, 12, 18 months. And I say happy, but you depending upon the sector, that's what we do. And that discipline around billing and getting paid and keeping your lockup closely managed, I think the bigger firms and the city firms have been much more disciplined in that. And I think that more regional practices and firms such as Ellisons have perhaps been slower because of our relationships with our clients, our long-lasting relationships, our relationships in the communities. And in the past, it hasn't been such a problem. But for the reasons you and I have been talking about, in terms of the heavy outlay and investment in people, in training, the costs of PI, the fact that we need better offices, I think our costs of running the business have increased at such a rate, and from a cash flow perspective, that you've got to address that funding issue somehow. And I can see why certainly accountancy professions and talking to them, that the private equity investment has been tempting, because it has addressed some of those cash flow issues for businesses that are fundamentally very profitable. I hope that that won't be a route that we have to pursue, and that the appetite for partners to invest their money and getting that balance in terms of addressing the pricing and management of lockup and the support of our excellent bank will mean that we don't need to worry too much. But in terms of other models there, employee ownership trusts, I know our corporate team are doing a lot in that space with clients. I've talked about that with our accountants. But that sort of sits alongside what we've talked about in terms of remuneration and wanting people to feel a part of the Ellisons family. I've always felt that for people to really feel part of it, you need to feel as though your remuneration, genuinely, you're receiving the benefit of the good years. When things are really good, you get a bit more. And then when things aren't so good, you understand that perhaps that bonus wasn't there. So we've forever tinkered with bonus schemes and remuneration to try to do that. I don't think there is a panacea. I think the EOT seems to work well and is driven largely by the tax saving, it seems to me, by owners of a business that are looking to extract their value and in the case of a law firm, get their capital and current accounts cleared out. I think that would sort of be an acknowledgement by us that we'd failed with our succession planning, and we definitely haven't. What I would love is some sort of flexible scheme, and I've talked about it, where you might have a shadow equity partner. So if you've got 9 equity partners, the 10th is the colleagues, and so whatever that share is, that's then divvied up between the colleagues in the business. So, but then you get this argument, well, should that be equal? Should that be based on a percentage of your remuneration? But I think it's right to share in the success of a business if you're committed, and if you genuinely feel that it is a family business, or like a family business, which I do about Ellisons. So more to come there from us, I hope. But I have to take all of my partners with me on those sorts of discussions.
I said at the start that I hope that people who listen to this will have some empathy and perhaps some sympathy. I love the fact that you think that that's in short supply for solicitors, and yes, at times it is, Guy. I just want to finish on the 4 C's that you've used in the course of conversation today. You talked about the importance of colleagues, clients, cash, and competency. And it reminded me of the meerkat from Compare the Market, simples. If that is what running a law firm is like, Guy, you're obviously making good work of it. But it's been great to have you on the podcast. And thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts, your insight, and also some of your challenges as well.
Thanks very much, David. Yes, I think there is a danger that we overcomplicate too much in life. I think those 4 C's are a really good basis for running any business, and then of course communicating that and getting that through to your colleagues, because that's the other thing, is if you are going to be successful, everybody needs to understand what Ellisons is trying to achieve. And I think through those 4 C's, which we've expanded out into our 4 core values, that's making it increasingly easy for us as a management team to communicate to our colleagues as to what we as a business are trying to achieve and how we can become successful. From my perspective, I've loved my career in the law. I think it's a wonderful profession to join. I'm delighted that there are so many different routes to qualification and to entering the profession now. I hated the fact that for years, some of my colleagues who I really admired, who were legal execs, couldn't be partners in a law firm. It made absolutely no sense to me. The fact that old-fashioned snobbery and nonsense and pomposity has been driven out of the profession to a large degree, I think is good news. And from a diversity perspective, I think it's wonderful that people can genuinely believe that they can pursue a career in this wonderful profession, even if they've not had the easiest start in life. So I look forward to many years to come working with Ellisons and in the law. And thank you for your time today.
The Today's Conveyancer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysconveyancer.co.uk. My thanks to Guy. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Conveyancer podcast, the leading source of information for residential property lawyers in England and Wales. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up to our free newsletter at todaysconveyancer.co.uk. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.